Good morning. So today we're starting off with types of membranes, which fits into our tissues. Looking here, for our epithelial membranes, we have a couple different kinds. We have mucous membranes, serous membranes, cutaneous membranes, and then we also have synovial membranes, which this is probably the one that you're most familiar with. Synovial joints, like when you pop your fingers or your knees, whatever, any joint that you have would be a synovial membrane in it. It's not epithelium, so we'll save it for later. The epithelial membranes we look at will be mucous, serous, and cutaneous. So with our mucous membranes, these are going to be full of goblet cells, and these are going to be around everything that lines a body cavity that comes into contact with our external environment. So your eyes have mucous membranes, right? Your mouth has mucous membranes, things like that. All of the wet areas exposed to the outer parts of the body. Okay, and then for serous membranes, these are going to line things that don't exactly come into direct contact with the external environment. A lot of times these are going to be lining body cavities and prevent friction from occurring. So when it says here fluid for lubrication, so this will be like in the heart, there's a sac around the heart so that when it beats, it's not like bumping into anything else. It's got its own cavity that it sits in. And even within that little sac that it sits in, between the heart itself and that tissue, there needs to be fluid between it, because when you rub your hands together, it starts to heat up. You get friction, versus when there is fluid between that, they just glide back and forth across each other. And so that's what we need a serous membrane for. Otherwise, you'd get friction every time your heart beat it, and every time your heart made a beat, and that would not be good. So then we get into our connective tissues, and these do exactly what they say they're going to do. They're going to bind tissues together, right? They're going to connect things. They offer support and strength to other tissues. When we think of our skin, right, we can pull our skin this way, we can pull it that way. It doesn't rip off of our bone, well, not our bones, but you know what I mean. The things underneath it. Because there's connective tissue holding that onto the next layer of tissue. Protection, insulation, we're going to talk about stuff called fascia that when it becomes fatty ends up having a bunch of adipocytes, and so it can provide insulation and keep you warm. Compartmentalize for sectioning off, that again goes back with fascia. And then energy reserves, we store fat somewhere, so we're storing energy. So what is the connective tissue made up of? A lot of it's going to be what's called extracellular matrix. Sometimes this is called ECM. And this is going to be kind of like the watery space between all of the different fibers within this. So it'll have different fibers and ground substance, which is like the fluidy stuff. Generally, it's going to be highly vascular, meaning it has a bunch of blood vessels, and it has nerves as well. So except for in cartilage and tendon, these two in particular don't have very good blood supply, and that's why they don't heal very quickly. And yeah, that's about it. Okay. So looking here, this is just like generalized connective tissue, but you can see how there's a capillary, there's all these reticular fibers moving around. We have nerves, we've got our different mast cells and adipocytes, right? Adipocyte is a fat cell. Notice how it just looks like a big block of butter, right? So fat cell. So what types of cells would you find in there? We've got fibroblasts, which are going to be making more of that ground substance. Adipocytes, which are fat sites. Mast cells, which produce histamine. So this is like what causes swelling when you have an injury. White blood cells for fighting off the bad guys. Macrophages go around eating up any bad, like if we've identified that bad guys have gotten into the body, they will eat those up. Or if there are pieces from cells that are no longer needed, like they will eat those up. Macrophage means big eater. And then plasma cells, which are going to secrete antibodies so that then we can identify when bad guys have come in, and we can know when they've entered again. We know the signs for it. For ground substance, this is going to be between all of those cells. So kind of like if you put, say you're making Jell-O with like fruit chunks in it. You put all the fruit chunks in there and then you pour the Jell-O over it. All the fruit chunks are in there, and the Jell-O would be the equivalent of the ground substance. So it is either fluid, semi-fluid, it can be gelatinous, love that word, or calcified, so it can be hardened as well. So like when we talk about bones. What can it do? It can support cells, it can bind them together, it can store water. And then what is it made of? It's made of proteins and complex sugars, polysaccharides. Then you have the fibers that are surrounding in there. And so reticular fibers you're going to hear a lot. That's going to be identified in a lot of different images. And then collagen fibers, it'll be collagen if it is white. If it's an elastic fiber, it'll be yellow. Now, the hard part here is that when we stain tissues, looking at like a real tissue sample, they will be more like a purpley blue color. So I'll show you how to identify that when we get there. The different types that these can be, we won't focus too much on it, but there is also embryonic connective tissue, which is called mesenchyme. This continues to help you even after being an embryo, like if you get a bone break. We have fluid, blood and lymph, loose, let's just say all these words, areolar, adipose, reticular, dense, regular, irregular, elastic, cartilage, hyaline, elastic, and fibrocartilage, and then bone. You'll also hear hyaline cartilage. For our embryonic tissues, this is what makes all of your other connective tissues. Like how we were talking about mesothelium makes all of your like muscles and organs and things like that. Okay, mesenchyme can make all of your connective tissues. And then you've got mucous connective tissue, which would be in the umbilical cord, and that stops after the umbilical cord's gone. For our fluid connective tissue, we have blood, looking here. You will have to identify this as blood. Notice how we have like all these little dots. These are the red blood cells. Red blood cells are so thin in the middle that they actually look like they're clear, but they're not. It's just that light's shining through it, like how you can shine light through certain thin curtains, right? And then these purple guys are the white blood cells. Lymph would also be a fluid connective tissue. So this is for your labeling packet. You can go through this. I'll just click them and it'll show you so that you can do that to practice. Okay, then we get to loose connective tissue for areolar. Notice how it looks like there's a bunch of space in everything. Okay, so loose connective tissue, things are not packed tightly together. Okay, for areolar, this is the most widely distributed in the body, mostly because it makes up fascia, which lines pretty much everything. Our body is compartmentalized into like saran-wrapped pieces, and this is the stuff that makes up all of it. So like think of a muscle. Next time you're cooking chicken or steak, get close in there. You'll see that there's like this clear tissue that you can pull off of it, or like when you make ribs, there's this clear tissue. If you pull that off, the meat will actually be more tender because you're taking off this connective tissue. Okay, so looking over here, so for your label packet, okay, you can slow this down by pausing. I'm just running out of time. For loose connective, we get adipose tissue. I always think that adipose looks like a bunch of like boiled eggs sitting there. Okay, notice that there's not a lot going on in a fat cell. It's got a nucleus, and then it's got this giant compartment. Whoops, it's got this giant compartment for holding fat. And so what is it for? It's for insulation. So all of that being compacted in there gives us heat stores, right? And then we can break that down into energy. So it's also an energy reserve. So there is white adipose and there's brown adipose. And here we go with labeling. Where would you find these things? Under your skin, between all of your muscles, around your kidneys, behind your eyeballs. It is for protection as well. For reticular connective tissue, they are in like a gel instead of like an actual fluid like the other ones we've been looking at. Where do we see this? In our liver, the spleen, and lymph nodes. This is very special to them. It always, to me, it looks like those cherry tree blossoms. Okay, when trying to identify these by sight, it always looks like cherry tree blossoms to me. How they have like the thick, dark branches and then the little buds on them for the cells. So when labeling this, we get our reticular fibers, your white blood cells, fibroblasts. Oops, sorry, I forgot to pause. So again, this is very specialized, liver, spleen, places like that. For your regular connective tissue or fibrous connective tissue, this is going to be for your ligaments and tendons. Aponeuroses are big sheet-like tendons, so like along your abs, places like that. Notice how they have like these wavy patterns, and they're very consistent with each other, right? They're not exactly parallel because otherwise they'd be exactly straight bars, but they run pretty regularly with each other, which is why we get regular connective tissue rather than irregular. But this is all for ligaments and stuff. So when labeling these, do note that we don't really see blood vessels in here. They don't generally have a good blood supply, which is why like when someone gets a hernia, which is when some of your intestine peeks through your aponeuroses on your stomach, it takes a long time to heal because if there's not a good blood supply, then there's not a good span of time for healing. Dense irregular tissue, where do we have this? In our joint capsules, your heart, the dermis of the skin, dura mater, which is all along your brain. If you want to know what that looks like, it looks a lot like the sclera of your eye. It's made of the same material. Okay, so dense irregular material. Found where pulling forces are exerted in many directions. With a tendon, if you stretch it this way, the way it's supposed to go, so that was for the regular connective tissue, if you stretch it this way, it should be fine. People have issues with their tendons when things get twisted, right? Their knee gets twisted in the wrong direction. Versus these guys are actually meant for that pull in different directions. So we have, comparing the two up here, regular dense tissue, and then down here, irregular. This always makes me think of like marbling of a steak. This is how I remember these guys. Okay. And then for our elastic tissue, do you see how it looks like springs? That's what I always think of here. I really gotta hurry. Okay, where would we find this? Labeled down in the bottom, and then you can go through and label these guys. For cartilage, chondrocytes are the little cells within there. Pericardium goes around, okay, peri like perimeter, okay, not a lot of blood vessels or nerves in here. Hyaline cartilage. This is the one that's found most around the body, provides flexibility, support. This is like what's between your bones, okay, at the growth plates, okay, at your articular cartilage, at your nose, right? This is hyaline cartilage, okay, your trachea. It's pretty stiff, but still flexible, okay? This always makes me think, hyaline cartilage always makes me think of soda bubbles popping up, okay? So going through here. Lacuna is the little lake where the cells are sitting. The cells are called chondrocytes. Fibrocartilage, absorbing shock. Big thing being your intervertebral discs, okay? The meniscus, your knee, your kneecap, okay? Don't really have a good way. I don't have like a saying or something to remember this one. I may have to do a second video. We shall see. Elastic cartilage. Looks like jellyfish coming up out of the sea. Okay, this is like your ear out here. Your epiglottis as well. And am I gonna get it all? Okay, and then this last